Just explain to us exactly, there is a further stage before you win that €100,000 prize.
Yeah, everybody's asked to do a 2,000-word essay, as it were. And then the top 20 will then be invited to do a more substantial work of between 10,000 and 20,000 words, a more thorough job, and on the basis of that, we will be awarding the prizes.
What's the point of it? I mean, why do you need a prize in order for someone to set out a blueprint for Britain leaving the EU?
Well, what's wrong with the prize? It'll encourage people to do it. No bad thing. It's been done in many cases over centuries to get things going. And the purpose is this, that there's going to be an in-out referendum. We've been promised. And what a lot of people have now in their mind is, OK, we realise that the European Union, as the President constituted, is very unattractive in various ways. But what will be the consequences of leaving? And this will be an exercise in looking at what the economic consequences are, what the legal consequences are, and what the political consequences are, and how we would handle those consequences. So I think it's something which people will want to be informed about before they cast their vote in the referendum.
Because you would like to set out what hasn't really been debated in full about the consequences of leaving in order to encourage more people to perhaps make that choice in favour of Britain leaving the EU?
Yeah, well, I have come to the conclusion it will be in our interest to leave the EU, and I have written at length the reasons I have. And I think a number of people are concerned about all the bureaucracy, the fact that the regulations has become something of a bureaucratic monstrosity, the interference where none is needed, and so on. But they are concerned, so they don't love the EU.
But they fear leaving.
They fear the unknown. And therefore it is very important, I think, that although the future is inherently unknowable, it is very important to make the unknown slightly more mapped out.
Yes, except we don't know what would happen. I mean, it's all theoretical. So that fear, to some extent, is well-founded, if you like. I mean, do you think that Britain is drifting, even though David Cameron has said he's negotiating to stay in eventually, but do you think Britain is drifting towards an exit?
I think what most people think is that there are quite a few good things coming from Brussels. From a consumer point of view, we've got lower mobile roaming charges in time for the summer holidays. There are things that are mattering to people's daily lives and their squeezed budgets that are being helped by some of the decisions that are being made in Brussels. There are other things that people can't stand about it. But I think in the end, it does feel as if the views of consumers and businesses are being rather swept aside by a very intense political debate. I'm not sure that's going to be helped by your prize. I mean, I'm sure there'll be people willing to write arguments about what would happen post-exit without €10 and
no,
worse.
There are huge issues at stake here, and to talk just about lower mobile roaming charges really is trivialising an historic debate.
Except isn't that what's important to many members of the public?
No, for goodness sake. There are a huge range of economic issues, and you have to decide where the balance of advantage lies. I'm not saying that the European Union, membership of the European Union, brings only harm. The question is whether it brings more good than harm or more harm than good. And you have to judge where the balance is, you have to judge where it's going, and the fact of the matter is that the European Union has changed. There's been a fundamental change since the coming of the common currency and the coming of the eurozone, of which quite rightly we're not a member. And that has changed the whole nature of the European Union, the whole nature of Britain's relationship with it, and therefore it is time to take stock.
Right. The point is not that it's solely about mobile roaming charges, but what I think you could usefully do with your prize is get people to focus on what matters to people in their daily lives about Europe, good and bad. There are some very practical changes that affect us all that have come in as a result of some of the barriers between countries coming down as a result of the EU. And I think you should get people to concentrate on that as much as the risks and what might happen if we exit. I think there's got to be a debate about this, absolutely, but, frankly, it does seem to me that the debate is already happening without your prize.
What do you think, then, in terms of those Conservative MPs who are going along at the moment with the idea of renegotiating our relationship with Europe? Are they doomed to disappointment?
I think they are doomed to disappointment. I think it's quite clear from one or two of the interviews you had before this discussion, that the European Union is not prepared to make any significant changes. Any changes which David Cameron is able to negotiate, or Ed Miliband if it's him, will be, in my judgment, and I've known the European Union very well, and have many, many friends there for many years, I think they will be inconsequential.
Do you agree with that? I mean, David Cameron is, he says, campaigning for a new relationship with Europe, and then when it comes to the referendum, if he is still Prime Minister, he will campaign to stay in. Not what actually many of his Conservative backbenchers would like to hear.
Well, he's got a bit of a problem, hasn't he, in keeping some of his backbenchers and indeed his party on side. And I think for most people looking on, it does seem a bit odd to be having a referendum and at the same time to be saying as Prime Minister I'd want to stay in. If that's what you believe, then stay in and promote the benefits to businesses and consumers of staying in Europe. If you want to get out, then take further steps faster towards getting out. Let's be clear about this.
Why does he think he can renegotiate successfully, David Cameron, a different relationship?
Well, maybe he's an optimist, and I certainly wish him the very best of luck. But my own considered judgment is that he is not going to get anything of any significance whatever. It's exactly the same when Harold Wilson... We've been through this before.
Yes.
Harold Wilson did this in the 1970s. He said, I'm going to renegotiate the terms, and he got absolutely nothing. And then there was a 1975 referendum where he said, look what I've got, which was actually nothing. But nevertheless, the majority of the people at that time, it was a different setup, voted, and I voted in favour of remaining a member.
Well, what's interesting, though, is you're asking for people to write a blueprint as to what happens to Britain if it leaves the EU. We heard there from European leaders saying you can't cherry-pick. We're not perhaps going to give you something. But we also heard from President Obama, who said it would be better to fix it than leave.
Oh, well, of course. President Obama is not the President of Britain.
No.
He's the President of the United States.
But does Britain get left isolated?
No, not at all. United States wants us in. Why? Because they are afraid of anti-Americanism in the European Union. They know that we are America's closest friend within the European Union, so they want us to remain in for their interests. If I were an American, it would be exactly the same. But that is not the question before the British people.
It isn't, but it is about spheres of influence. I mean, have we got as much to be frightened of leaving the EU as perhaps some people think?
Well, I think that maybe we'll shed some light on this through the essays that Lord Lawson is going to generate. But I think for most people, they are much more relaxed about the prospect of staying in for the long term. And I think probably hoping that the Prime Minister does get some concessions in his negotiations, gets things a bit more back on our terms as the UK. But for most people, this isn't the thing that will centrally decide where they stand in the election.
We must incidentally give credit to the Institute of Economic Affairs, whose idea this was and who set it up. I have nothing to do with it. They just asked me to be the chairman of the judges.
To the winning piece, is it going to be presented to anyone? I mean, will we see it in lights?
Of course, it'll be published, and it will be prominently published.
Will you take it to Number 10?
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure that Number 10 will be anxious to read it.
I'm sure they will. Well, you need to get your entry in, Richard, if you want a chance. Thank you very much, Nigel Lawson.